but this is Join Clean Ghana campaign in collaboration with the Accra Metropolitan Assembly. It's also bringing out a very important role that the assemblies can play in one of the exercises. We all know how one assemblyman distracted it, bringing it to an end abruptly, if you like, and how subsequently we've seen assemblymen in the thick of it. Our next conversation also falls in line, and I think it will be good for me to start from the point of view of, who the assembly man or woman is, how powerful can they get, what's their critical role in the community. My guest is a member of Parliament for Ikuapem South and a Deputy Local Government and Rural Development Minister, Mr. Osei Bonsu Amwa. Good morning to you.
Good morning, Mama.
Thank you for coming.
Thank you so much. It's been a while here.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yes.
We're going to be talking about the election.
And happy birthday.
Oh, thank you. Thank you so much. I'm grateful. So in line with our campaign and the effective role that the assemblyman can play, can you give us a bit of highlights?
Well, by our Constitution and the Local Governance Act, decentralization means sending power down to the very lowest level. So you have electoral areas across the country. Each district has electoral areas. So if you come to Ikuapem South, we have 26 electoral areas. And for the 26 electoral areas, they are supposed to elect one person to represent them at the district assembly. So you have assembly members elected to represent electoral areas at the district assembly, because the assembly is said to be the highest political authority in the district. And they have the deliberative, executive, and legislative functions. So that is how powerful the assemblyman is, because they take decisions for the district. And of course, apart from those who have been elected, there are those who are appointed, 30%, and then this DCE, who's also appointed, and the member of parliament who belongs to that district. So they constitute the membership, and they take decisions for their district. So for assembly member, your functions are cut out for you. You belong to various committees. You also have to listen to the people and send their views to your assembly. And then at the General Assembly meeting, decisions are taken.
With your experience, who are the people that we put there? Who are the people who are usually, who even put themselves up to be elected to such positions?
Well, I must admit that usually don't have people you say are of the very highest caliber, if I'm allowed to use that expression, except that when it comes to appointees, the idea was to get more people involved. So I always cite myself as an example. I was made a governor appointee when it was then the Ikuapem South District Assembly, including in some, that's the Bree in some combination, because they said I had a legal background.
Okay, but at this point you were not a member of parliament.
I wasn't a member of parliament, so I was made a governor appointee, and during Honorable Ban reduced time. So I became a member of the assembly. But if you look at those who go for election, you may find some, you have teachers, you have other persons, but obviously it's not that competitive. You don't see people thinking that it's so important than when it comes maybe a member of parliament. So we could let people know how strategic and important that role is, and then get more people to be involved. Especially, some of us see it more or less as part-time, in the sense that you don't go to the assembly every day. Of course, if you serve on a committee, you may be meeting often. But the assembly itself, the law says you should meet at least 3 times in a year. So it becomes more or less a quarterly thing. So that is what it is. But it's a very critical institution under our local governance system.
Why do you think we don't find it? Why do you think we don't find it attractive? Because you see now that the NCCE, for instance, is trying to get people in the middle class, all of us, to be interested, and they say, put yourself up, you know, when the time comes.
Yes, but from what you're doing, which is very laudable, this sanitation thing, it shows that you know the real role of assembly member. So obviously, people say that there are no salaries attached to it, which is true. Just some sitting allowance that you get. 2, people don't see it as high enough. An MP, if I have 26 electoral areas, it means I'm in charge of all the 26 electoral areas. Or if I'm an assembly member, you're in charge of only one electoral area. And it's very critical. And I think people should be encouraged to represent those at that level. And then once you get the right caliber, it enriches the work of the assembly. They help the assembly itself, that's the DC and the staff in the assembly, including the coordinating director. It's something that we should be really interested in.
Let's talk about the upcoming election. Also talk about the vacuum that would be created because this does not coincide exactly with the tenure. Explain to us what is going to happen.
Well, by the Constitution, the term of the assembly members is 4 years. So once your 4 years is up, you will have to go for elections or you'd have to quit. Now, what appears to be happening is that the EC is required to set a date. Of course, the Constitution and the law also requires that assembly elections should be at least 6 months apart from the parliamentary elections. But over the years, it appears that the dates for assembly elections have been changing, unlike the date for presidential and parliamentary elections. So if you recall, in 2015, the EC had set the date for elections somewhere in March, but they opened nominations and were supposed to hold elections subsequent to the closing of the nominations. But they had even brought a CI to Parliament, which had not matured, more or less, had not had the 21 sitting days required under the Constitution. So when they opened the nomination, an interested party went to court and said that once the CI had not matured, they could not open nomination for the elections. Went to Supreme Court gave its ruling and directions. Eventually, the elections were held in September. So between March and September, there was a vacuum. The ideal thing, what we were hoping for as a ministry, was that come 1st September this year, the EC would have been ready to hold elections so that the 4-year thing will be strictly complied with. But as we speak, the EC initially set a November date, went to 10th December, and now EC is saying 17th December.
Is this solely the responsibility and the call of the Electoral Commission?
Solely, the Electoral Commission, as the law has shown, the Electoral Commission sets the date for the elections. And we don't seem to have put in the law that will require them to stick to a certain date. So they keep postponing it.
So like we have December 7th.
Yes.
Every 4 years, you know that you have elections.
Yes, because if you interpret it, the EC interprets it and has a way of determining the date. And then that's what we have stuck to. Remember, they wanted to even bring it forward to November, and they had to come to Parliament, but they didn't go through. But for the assembly elections, it appears this is the time for us to even agree on a specific date and comply with the dates. Otherwise, we keep shifting, and there's always that vacuum. The law tries to make amends for that vacuum, but it's not too, I say, how the law puts it is that we should hold elections. If for any reason the EC cannot hold elections,
then the president will have to appoint an interim.
May appoint interim management committee to run the assembly.
And that's what usually happens.
That is what should happen. This law is quite new. This is 2016 law. Before then, I don't remember they set up IMCs.
Okay, but then we would still find the presidency appoints.
No, what happens is that when the assemblies are dissolved, the DC and the coordinating director, they are still in place. And then the officers of the local government service, they are also in place.
Okay.
It's just that assemblies cannot hold meetings.
Okay, so but what it is with this new law is that we will have an interim committee
It's
separate from...
The law says the president may, but even the may is saying that when elections cannot be held.
Okay.
But here elections will be held, except that the date creates that vacuum.
Okay, so what it means is we don't know what is going to happen within that period, whether or not government is going to set up a committee, or the caretakers will be the DCs and...
Yes, we have up to 7th October. If the president decides that we should set up IMC, the president will make the point clear, and then we'll have to comply. As we
what would be most effective? Because there are people who have said that when the elections are delayed, you don't have things being effective at the assembly level. And I'm not sure how this works without those who are supposed to be elected.
Well, the reality is that when elections are delayed, the first thing is that you don't have assembly members. So you don't have anybody representing you at the local electoral area level.
Okay.
But that one, IMC cannot cure it. IMC cannot appoint somebody as acting assembly member. You understand?
Okay, so that will still be representatives of the government anyway, just like the DCE.
No, the reality is that when elections are not held, means that the electoral area is not represented. And the only cure for it is to make sure that the dates coincide with when the term ends, so that new people will be put in place.
Okay, but as it is now, that's not going to happen. There will still be a vacuum created.
As it is now, there's a vacuum. And I'm saying that if you look at the law, it says IMC. It doesn't give the number. It doesn't tell us the composition. Well, obviously, because you have a DC and you have coordinating director, they are likely to be members. But what they will do cannot be the work of the assembly, because they cannot pass resolution, for instance, because the assembly which passes resolution. It's just like saying that even for their case, they don't have a presiding member, because the presiding member is an assembly member, so his term too would end. It's just like saying that in parliament, you don't have a speaker, and then you don't have members of parliament, but you want an interim body to run it.
That's impossible.
How are they going to play the role of parliament? So that is the challenge that we have. The cure is to fix the date so that this vacuum is reduced as much as possible. Now, the end in October, and by December we should hold elections. It's quite short as compared with the March to September situation. But that is not the ideal thing. Ideally, we should have dates that will take out this vacuum.
So is the ministry, because the ministry is obviously concerned about this, is there anything that you can do in terms of maybe communicate with the Electoral Commission, because we are both agencies?
We have discussed with the Electoral Commission. We wish the date had been earlier, but we have written to the assemblies, especially the DCs, that make sure you comply with the 4-year deadline. So by 7th October, every assembly would have been dissolved, except those who had elections later on than the 2015 one. And then take charge of the place in the absence of the assemblies. And don't take decisions that the assemblies would have taken. Those are the directives that we've given to the chief executives. If you have to, for instance, make bylaws, fix fees, pass resolutions.
You cannot.
You cannot, because those are the responsibilities of the General Assembly, represented by the assembly members. So that aspect you can't do, but day-to-day administrative work, you are free to do it so that assemblies will run.
So does it stall infrastructure? Does it stall projects? Does it stall strategic decisions that the assembly would otherwise have made?
Not necessarily, except that if a committee had to take a decision, because the most powerful committee at the assembly level is the executive committee. The executive committee has various subcommittees under them, which is works, if it's security, and all those things. if they were in place and functioning, it makes things easier. But in the absence, the chief executive and his or her team would have to take decisions, but to be sure that there would not be decisions that would have been taken by the assembly. So of course, if a planning committee is supposed to take a decision on permits, etc., etc., in the absence of the committee, things will stall, except that the chief executive, the coordinator, and the others involved will still go ahead without the assembly members.
Okay.
That is if they are not in the majority.
Okay. Let's just also say that this election would go alongside the referendum.
Certainly.
Is it clear in everybody's mind that these two will go together?
If you say, is it clear in everybody's mind? Then you want me to read the mind of everybody?
No, certainly not.
But the reality is that we still need to do a lot of work. People somehow get a bit confused, and then we think probably the message hasn't gone down well. But thankfully, last week, there was this collaboration which was launched, NCC, ISD coming on board just to educate and inform people. Before then, there was this coalition by CSOs, CDD and IDEC, and then the local governors. Who
strongly want a yes vote. CDD was advocating for a yes.
Yes, but the reality is that people should know what is really going to happen.
What a yes means.
As you said, the assembly elections is on 17th December. That same day, we will have a referendum. And the referendum will be for the people of Ghana to decide whether MMDCs should be elected on partisan basis, or parties, to put it rightly, whether parties should be allowed to sponsor candidates for elections at the district level. Now, before you even get to that, there is a bill in Parliament, 2431, which seeks to amend the Constitution. And because it's not entrenched, Parliament can do it. It seeks to amend the Constitution to take away the power of the President to appoint MMDCs. And once that power is taken away, the rest is for the people to decide whether in electing those at the district level, parties should be allowed to sponsor candidates for such elections. In the case of the 2431 in Parliament, you need 2/3 of members of Parliament to agree that it should be amended at the second reading stage. When you pass the second reading stage, you go to what we call the consideration stage. And then from consideration, you come to third reading. At the third reading, you need 2/3.
Okay, so where are we now in the process?
Where are we now is that we are at the second reading stage. We've debated and everything, but we didn't vote. The Speaker didn't ask for us to vote because he felt that there was not much consensus. There wasn't consensus because on the very morning of the debate, the minority side said they think that we should go for a referendum before.
Okay.
But our argument is that what are you going to ask for at the referendum? What are you going to ask for at the referendum?
Should we make it political partisan or not?
But you haven't amended the Constitution which says that they should be elected.
Okay, but doesn't it also, okay.
So the sequence is very critical.
Isn't this also strategic? If the people say, yes, let's make it partisan, then you go back to Parliament. After all, you're representing the people. The people say yes. So you go back to Parliament and then you say, okay, well, we have no choice. Majority, let's go for it.
You can easily avoid the two. What do we want? This is a president who says that I have been given the power to appoint all these people, 260 as we speak. But I want to cede that power. So we have to grab it first. We grab it by saying in Parliament that, thank you so much. Now we have removed that provision that empowers you to appoint such persons. So that once we agree in Parliament, it means that such persons will be elected. As to whether it will be partisan or non-partisan, we have approved the first step that they should be elected.
Okay, so let's let's do the other side of it.
Yeah.
If Parliament approves that first step, so-called, and the people reject, what happens?
When the people reject, the only thing that people are saying is that we don't want it to be partisan.
Exactly.
No, once they reject, when the people reject, it still means that they will be elected, but it should not be on partisan basis.
Okay.
You understand?
Yes, I do.
So that you don't lose both ways. Touch wood, because the threshold is very high. 40% turnout, 75% to approve. Anything can happen, assuming you get 74%. You haven't secured it. Assuming you get 39% turnout, your 90% approval will not even count. You understand?
I do.
We don't want a situation where, touch wood, if anything happens and you don't get approval, then people will say that people have rejected it, so why are you still saying that we should amend it in Parliament? So let's tell the people, and that would, some of us, the argument is that will even bring on board the political parties, because frankly the political parties are ambivalent. They are watching. But if you send a message to them that Parliament has agreed that the President should no more appoint MMDCs, then political parties will wake up and say, hey, if they are going for elections, then we should also be given a right to sponsor such candidates, so that you don't have 10 or 15 people standing in one district, because nobody is regulating them.
I'm sure we'll see this conversation come back once Parliament returns. Is back on recess.
Yes, it will be a major issue.
I thought we'll spend just a minute talking about the Joy Clean Ghana campaign. I had the AMA boss in the studio, and I asked if there's any special support in terms of money set aside for when they decide to enforce their own regulations. He said no. I mean, you still have to work with what you have.
But I don't know what you would have meant by special support.
Okay.
But there's a ministry for sanitation.
Okay.
There's a ministry for sanitation.
Okay.
The ministry has its policies, it has its budget and everything. And then we as local governments, because the assemblies are under us, we're also pushing our support. But at the assembly level, they are supposed to devote part of their budget for sanitation, including even what they raise internally. Of course, they will tell you that they need more. And
more they do.
Of course.
Because, for instance, if we give them the power to find people on the spot, that would be very good.
Yes, the law would have to be looked at. The Minister of Finance would have to approve it.
Okay, well. Yes. All right, thank you very much, Mr. Osei. He's a member of Parliament.
To you again.
Thank you very much. He's a member of Parliament for Ikuapem South and a deputy local government minister, helping us understand a lot more about the district assembly elections coming up.